Monday, November 25th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. It's day one of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Today on the show, working towards a feminist future free of gender-based violence. You'll hear from the folks at the YWCA and about a strategic plan that aims to do just that. So with the start of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, the United Nations put out a stat earlier today. Every 10 minutes, partners and family members killed a woman or girl intentionally in 2023. Gender-based violence. It's a global issue, a national one, and one that impacts this province and each and every one of the communities that are in it. So that's the framing up of the conversation for today. Right? And like I said, we're going to talk to folks who are working towards a feminist future free of gender-based violence. Joining me in studio, Executive Director, YWCA St. John's, Maria Gentle. Drishti Patel, Youth Programs Coordinator, YWCA St. John's. Cole Kippenhook, owner of Crow Kinship Consulting and contributor to the YWCA Strategic Plan as their Indigenous Accountability Partner. And on the line, Aline Nitsigama, the CEO of YWCA Canada. Thank you all for joining me and for joining us here on The Signal today. Maria, let's start with you. I saw there in my inbox this morning, there was a news release from the YWCA. Can you just talk about the release and where things are, and then we can dive further into everything that's part of that?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me and for featuring the work of the YWCA St. John's here today. As part of the 16 Days Against Gender-Based Violence, the YWCA St. John's is launching our new strategic plan towards a feminist future. We want to highlight our new mission, vision, values that really root us in this work and really tie us to the realities and conditions that our work encompasses. So gender-based violence is really addressing sexism, homophobia, transphobia. It includes sexual violence, physical, emotional abuse, financial abuse. And those are the realities that folks are walking in our doors with and the conditions in which we seek to address. It's not easy work, but we have a vision where we are looking at individuals, communities, and systems, and we can do better.
Drishti, wondering, I know you've got some other statistics there. I started with one, but could you highlight us with some others, either nationally or locally for the province?
Of course. Thanks, Adam. So as you mentioned, GBV harms us all, and it is really an intersectional lens that helps us understand who is at a higher risk of experiencing violence. And these are some numbers that I've pulled from Stats Canada and the Federal Wage Ministry. So, for instance, if we talk about the LGBTQ community, LGBTQ women, especially with disabilities, have a 71% chance of experiencing some sort of IPV, which is intimate partner violence, since the age of 15. Indigenous women are also at a very high risk of experiencing intimate partner violence, which is almost 16 times higher than all other women. My work is around a lot of youth, and I work directly with young people in schools and in community. And some stats around that, if you'd like
sure.
me to share.
Yeah, sure. Don't go ahead.
So young women are also at a 7 times more risk of experiencing GBV. And trans youth, non-binary youth, 70% of them are coming out with reports of experiencing sexual harassment. So the rates are alarming.
Yeah, no, they are. Cole, can you talk about your role with the strategic plan and just your thoughts of when you were brought on board?
Absolutely. I really appreciate that there's been a collaborative approach to this. So when we think of looking at strategic planning and taking that sort of decolonial lens and incorporating that with other intersectionality, this is where I come in. I bring an Indigenous lens, I bring a queer lens, I bring a gender diverse lens, and I come with a lot of lived and living experience of being a part of this province for the 49 years I've been alive. So what I tend to do is come and then work with all of the partners around the table to just make sure we are seeing those intersectional lenses. We're looking at things like the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. We're looking at MMIWG 2S Plus national action plans. We're bringing in things like UNDRIP, and then we're also framing it from this provincial piece where we know there's a unique experience that happens not just around gender-based violence, but just how we are able to access programs and services.
All right. And we will drill down into a fair bit of that now a little bit later in the show. I want to go with Aline. Aline, what for the YWCA nationally, can you just talk about how it's all connected and some of the, I guess, how you see some of the differences and similarities for your organization?
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
So, yes, we nationally at the national office, we get to have the role of looking at the collective issues that our member associations are dealing with, and I know we've cited a few stats, but like one that I would like to add to that is that a woman is killed every 48 hours in Canada, and that's something that not everybody fully has in their conscience at this every minute of your living. It's something that we work with, and in response to that, we look at our member associations, and there are 29 member associations across the country, and look at the responses that we have. So currently, as something that's hopeful, I guess, to share here, we have something like 257 gender-based violence intervention programs that we operate nationally. And that is to respond to the unique ways through which the GBV shows up. And we just always are, it's jarring to know that some of the GBV is now at epidemic levels. We are now talking about the issue in this way, and how it ties to other things like housing, like women's economic empowerment, and childcare, youth engagement. All those things are interconnected, and nationally we get to look at how each location is responding to those needs and tell that collective impact story.
What do you see when it comes to your leadership? What do you bring to this personally? You're talking about an epidemic. Yourself as CEO of the YWCA Canada, it's quite the leadership position. So, what is it that you're bringing to this, or that you believe you're bringing?
Yeah, no, my own. So a number of us who work in the sector always bring our whole selves to work. I've heard some of the panelists share from their own lived experience. I bring the same view. I myself am a Black and racialized woman from African descent who immigrated here. So I still consider myself as a newcomer, although it's been a number of years. And so that is, again, a unique perspective. And when we're talking about the issues around accessibility to housing and gender-based violence and how the cultural piece plays into that. And myself as a newcomer, having to also learn a lot about the history of this land and how truth and reconciliation continue to be at the center of everything that we should be doing in Canada, and especially in relation to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And so I bring all of that. I am also a Francophone person, and that's, again, something else that that plays into this national role, because we know that our communities also involve Francophone communities, which are part of the foundation of this nation again. And so all those things, and having worked in different sectors, one of the most important ones being worked in government, we see how we can then engage with decision makers in advocacy, in systemic change at the policy level, so that we can continue to work towards measurable progress to improve the lives of women and girls and gender diverse people living on this land. So I bring that lived experience to try to paint a picture for people to understand what the issues we talk about.
Thanks so much for that, Aline. And so sit tight, and if at any point you want to say something, go ahead and say it, but we'll whip through and check back with you. But if something does come up, feel free just to, because it's always a little awkward if someone's on the phone line for if I can't see your eyes. So
I will
chat away as the spirit moves you. December 6th, 1989. It's coming up to the anniversary, 35 years ago, right? 14 women were killed, another 13 injured at École Polytechnique by men motivated by hatred of feminists. 35 years ago. and yet here we are today having this conversation. What do you all think about that? That has been 35 years, and yet this is the conversation that we're still having about the need to end gender-based violence.
I think at the heart of it, Adam, is that we need to place a value on the lives of women, Two-Spirit, gender-diverse people, and children. And when we place the value on those lives, then collectively we can ensure that there's a life worth living, and that people throughout society place a value on those lives. And I think that is particularly important when we talk about truth and reconciliation, because I think December 6th is a very stark reminder of violence in a very tangible way. And we know colonial violence has a long history in Canada that disproportionately impacts Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. And I think that's on a individual and systemic level, one that we need to, keep front and center.
Cole, any thoughts on that?
Yes, and I think that is, for me, I think of sometimes systems are slow to change.
Yeah.
And so we see these things that have been rooted very much, within colonialism. If we speak about things around, capitalism and just how we find ways to work together. So when we talk about truth and reconciliation, for example, where's the truth, and then what's the truth to action? Right? So if we see things that we know have been issues for generations, how we start to sort of center things around care and then see how everybody is involved in that. So that goes cross-culturally. A lot of times I see things where there is separation within system. And so we do things that highlight inclusivity, but then how does that work intersectionally? And I still think that a lot of times we'll have systems that are working in their own lanes, if you will, and then it's how do they actually see the intersectionality to do these things? Because we're talking about, impacts of gender-based violence, and we also need to bear in mind those who create and cause violence, and where did that root come from? What does healing look like? What does healing look like in communities? What does healing look like in systems? And if we look at some of those things, we don't see the significant change happening in either that would allow true healing for all of the impacts. Because when gender-based violence happens, everybody is impacted, and we're still framing a gender conversation that is still being fit within a binary, and we need to start to think past and beyond that, and also the intersections that become a piece of that. So abilities become a piece of that. Ethnicity becomes a piece of that. And then going deeper into it beyond what we see as gender-based analysis plus sort of identity factors, and seeing this in a deeper collaborative way. So it's not a top-down, it's not always a bottom-up, but it's somewhere in the middle. And that's how sort of I have been taught around healing work, is that in order for us to address trauma, we need to talk sometimes more about healing. So I think we're still talking about violence and how we talk about solution to violence.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I think not only solution, but I'm just so keen to hear from you, Drishti, as youth programs coordinator, when you think about the prevention work that we do. There's the healing aspect, and then how do we do better to educate young people to understand GBV and prevent it?
Absolutely. That's a great point, Maria. And I was just reflecting on this question, Adam, and one piece that comes to mind is that experiencing GBV is very isolating, and doing this work is also isolating if you don't do it collaboratively. So collective action towards prevention and starting at a young age is what I do, work with youth, is truly important. And I'm happy to share more about how the programming goes and how we've developed it.
And Aline, I believe I heard you agreeing there. Do you want to add anything?
Yes, I tend to agree very verbally.
No, I like it. It's great. It helps.
Yes, no, I just was jumping off of the words Nicole was sharing around the importance of truth and reconciliation, especially that truth-telling piece, and how those words resonate nationally for us is a movement, the YWCA movement. It is work that we are deeply engaged in right now, and we'll be able to share more in the coming days and months. But it is important for us, as as you may know, we've been around for a long time, and sometimes we've participated in harmful ways as well. This is something that as an organization we are very much looking into and ready to be able to come from that authentic place where we are in a number of regions. We really do have a large proportion of Indigenous women accessing services. In many situations, it's the only services that they have in some of the more remote and rural locations. But we know that we haven't always shown up in very inclusive ways, in anti-racist and decolonial ways. And so to amplify the words that I'm hearing around the panel, it is work that we are committed to doing and advancing, and actually creating a space for other organizations like us to start to acknowledge the truth, and then center Indigenous voices to lead the way towards the healing. I really loved, I think I was agreeing with the healing part. And it is very much something that we're engaged in. I'm just going to leave with the fact that we are also engaged nationally with strategic planning that will mimic and mirror what our member associations like St. John's are doing and how they're centering these conversations.
Thank you for that. We've got Faye Johnstone on the line, Executive Director of Wisdom to Action and YWCA Strategic Plan Consultant. Faye, thanks for coming on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's bright and early in Vancouver, but it's not raining here. It's not raining there, so some magic happening.
Thank you for taking the call from Vancouver at your time for this. The day is just getting started. Tell folks a bit about yourself, if you could.
Yeah, so I am the special advisor and co-owner of Wisdom to Action. We are a consulting firm that works with nonprofits, health and social services, and government on all things strategic planning, organizational development, diversity, equity, inclusion, and community engagement. I also wear a hat as a member of the YWCA Canada's board of directors, so I live in this world quite a bit, so I feel like I'm in the best company this morning.
Yeah, it's a pretty good guest list here today, I must say, Faye. So you're doing this work nationally, and then there's a request comes in for a role in the strategic plan. So can you tell us just when you get that request, or however that kind of happens, what your thoughts are, and then what was the work like to put into the strategic plan?
We are always keeping an eye out for organizations that are looking to bring in a firm and whose values align with our own. And so we were really excited to begin this journey with YWCA St. John's. And the work itself was very much just connecting with community, speaking with folks about what their vision as community members, as partner organizations, as board members and staff, what their vision for YWCA St. John's looks like, but also what's their vision for, the province more broadly and the role that YWCA St. John's can play in that. So it was a lot of, getting into dreaming and then going from dreaming to putting a plan in place. But I'm really proud of what we came up with, of what Maria and her team have made happen here, and I'm excited for where it'll bring the organization.
So then when you look at feminist organizations and the current evolution for where a lot of them are trying to go and where they're pushing towards, including YWCA St. John's, what are your thoughts on when you look at this direction and like down the road, what this can mean 5-10 years down the road from here?
I think we've seen an incredible evolution over the past 20 years. I think feminist organizations have a powerful legacy, but as Aline alluded to, at times in that legacy, we didn't do justice to our feminist values in the way that we might want to, and didn't always meet the needs of those in our community who are most marginalized, and sometimes we were complicit and harmed in that space. And so, my vision for the future and what I'm seeing as a shift for feminist organizations is, honoring and being accountable for that path, but learning the lessons to be more intersectional, to serve those who are most marginalized. And I think that really is the direction the sector and YWCA St. John's in particular, I would say, is heading in. And I think it is indeed one that excites me and will better meet the needs of the communities these organizations serve.
So then, Faye, for yourself and other, what other? So there's this work you've been doing, but is there anything else? I'm just curious as to what other work you're doing or you're going to be doing in other parts of the country from here on out that is either echoes this or furthers some of the work that you've already done around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I with my consulting firm hat, we're doing a lot of work in the feminist space around addressing the rise of anti-LGBTQI plus hate and helping build solidarity and help folks, as everyone is increasingly becoming aware of, understand that a lot of the hate we're seeing targeting queer and trans people is a bit of a Trojan horse targeting our feminist values, our feminist movements as well. And so that's some of the work in terms of, building solidarity between and across our movements that really excites me. I was actually in St. John's just about a week ago, connecting both with some of the team at YWCA St. John's, but also connecting with the workers' movement and helping build solidarity there. And so I think this unity message and unifying vision of the future is where the magic is at.
So how do you stay in that headspace because when we talk about the fact of the rise of LGBTQ plus hate and the fact that gender-based violence is an epidemic across the country, yet you've got a lot of great energy, and I'm hearing a lot of optimism in the face of what is just really, really tough stuff. I'm just wondering how you keep pushing ahead like this.
Fighting for freedom was never easy. No. I stand on the shoulders of giants. That's true in the feminist space. That's true in the queer space. And so for me, what keeps me going is realizing both, how far we've come, but also the real material changes we've made in the lives of young people, of queer people, of women and girls across the country. And so, it's a bit of a scary time right now. We're in a period of backlash, but we've been here before. We've overcome and we've pushed further every single time these moments happen. And I know we're going to do so again here.
Faye Johnstone, thank you. Does anyone else want to say anything to Faye before we let Faye go?
Well, it's Maria here, Faye. Thank you so much for your support of our strategic plan, for helping us, gather the voices of community who we really do this for. And I really share your optimism because not only can we change systems, can we inform policy, we can really listen to that community voice. And it really reminds me when you're speaking of intersections about the LGBTQI plus newcomer project that we have, we think about the realities and lived experiences of folks in our province. And, we need to have a recognition that LGBTQI plus folks from around the world are arriving in Newfoundland and Labrador to flee violence based on gender-based violence. And, when folks come here expecting freedoms and still experience harms, we have a responsibility to do better, like I said at the top of the show. So, we're offering workshops to community organizations who are serving LGBTQI plus newcomers, but we also offer a peer support group, recognizing that folks can offer support to each other, and a mentorship program saying that when folks come here, we're going to match you with someone who's going to, walk through the systems together. So I really hear Faye's activism, optimism, and that really led to, so much that's within our strategic plan to help us ground in what we're doing and vision forward.
Well, Faye Johnstone. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Aline here. I just wanted to also echo Maria was saying and just share how much energy Faye brings to the boardroom at our national level, and just absolutely the optimism around what we've achieved, and also in times of duress, how much it is an energizing and an opportunity to organize, and Faye's leading in its way, and very much in an inspirational way to say that this is a time where we actually get up and continue to do the work that we do, but in a more amplified way, but also continuing to center that joy, because it is really bleak work, but there are things that we can concretely say that we've achieved and we can maintain and protect. And for that, thank you so much, Joy, for being part of this work.
Faye Johnstone, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, enjoy the day in Vancouver. Cheers.
Thanks, Faye.
There we go. All right, you're listening to The Signal. I'm Adam Walsh. It's day one of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Today on the show, working towards a feminist future free of gender-based violence. So here I've got guests connected to and with the YWCA, and we're talking about a new strategic plan that aims to do just that, right? To work towards that feminist future free of gender-based violence. Here with me in studio, Executive Director of the YWCA St. John's, Maria Gentle, Drishti Patel, Youth Programs Coordinator at YWCA St. John's, Cole Kippenhook, owner of Crow Kinship Consulting and contributor to the strategic plan as their Indigenous accountability partner, and on the line, Aline Nitsiyama, CEO of YWCA Canada. Lots of voices here today. No shortage of great conversation to have important conversation to have around this topic. Maria, let's talk about the strategic plan. There are 5 directions to this. I'm not going to quiz you on it, but just give me just an overall view of, because when we say strategic plan, all right, we're driving a car somewhere. Where are we going with this?
Okay, first of all, off the heels of Faye's comment about the work that we need to do, the intersectional voices, Faye and Wisdom to Action were integral in the work of building the strategic plan. But then when we were able to bring Cole Kippenhook on board as Indigenous accountability partner, the depth just also widened. And the work that we're doing as part of our strategic plan, it includes the action of reconciliation. And Faye did the groundwork of building our community voice, and Cole brought in a whole other relational piece that embedded reconciliation throughout the whole strategic plan. So I really just want to focus on that for a moment.
Sure, yeah. No,
the other part that we did was really listen to community and listen to team members, staff, participants. We had to revamp our whole vision, mission, and values so that we could look, like you said, towards a feminist future, so we could look at our mission as advancing gender equity and really centering the whole systems in which this work is happening. So we really took away words like women, girls, because those languages are changing. Yeah. The community is changing, and we want to make sure we can serve folks who need us most. And then we can talk about the 5 directions if you want.
Sure. Yeah. No. Yeah. Go for it. Yes, please. What are the 5 directions? Where are the different ways that this thing is heading?
Yeah. So one is that really just deepening some of the responses to community need, and so strengthening and expanding systems of support that really advance gender equity within Newfoundland and Labrador. And so examples of that are really around some of the programs and services that we already do, and recognizing the unique impact that they have. So I already mentioned, for example, the LGBTQI plus newcomer program. That's sort of cross-cutting services that meets a wide range of needs, based on some gaps in systems. But we also look at the needs for childcare and housing as it relates to gender equity. And we are really grateful for funds from Federal Women and Gender Equality through their Economic and Leadership Opportunity Fund. We're going to be looking at the lack of spaces, of childcare spaces, and how that impacts women and gender diverse people. And as it relates to gender-based violence, this can really, impact racialized, migrant, folks with disabilities and low income at a higher rate. And so it can also, when we're not able to have childcare spaces, it impacts people's financial security and traps folks in unsafe relationships. And so, really the lack of childcare impacts everyone. And so beyond gender-based violence, we're looking at a kind of a lifespan of educational opportunities. We're looking at the impact for workers. And so these are sort of systemic needs and gaps in services, and we're hoping to fill some of those.
It sounds like, because you're getting some social determinants of health stuff thrown
Absolutely.
in here, right? Like, so it's in that ballpark, and yet Cole, like you've talked about the intersectionality. So like it's how are folks stacked? How are they made up? What is it with them that could make them perhaps that's been ignored over the years? And what do we need to provide to shore that up and to kind of even out the help that goes across with everyone else, right?
Exactly.
Am I catching it? Okay.
Yeah, you're picking it up. And Cole, did you want to say more to that?
Yes, because I think there is the intersectionality piece, and I really appreciate that within this strategic plan that we are taking things and looking outside that binary, and we're seeing how diversity really can come across as cross-culturally, stepping outside just sort of like male and female, and how we see gender diversity within that. So I do think, and I also was thinking of what Faye was saying, and within this is that we also are able to, so a lot of the framework that I use one in particular that comes from Stell Raven, who is a trauma therapist, and it really looks at trauma responses, this decolonizing your perspective by looking at like resistance and resiliency and reclamation, and seeing these as strengths of people who have experienced, whether it's violence or trauma or going through colonial systems. And so that we're also able to see, when we talk about this optimism or this hope, and I work a lot from a two-spirit lens, and I see how we've been invisibilized in so many different spaces. And so that can be really hard, like that, being rejected from our own communities, but then also not having systems respond to us in ways that are truly inclusive. There's a lot of language of gender diversity, but what that actually looks like. So for me, we were able to bring that framework, we call it sort of that 3 R's, into what the YWCA is doing, so that we also are able to really lift up the voices and the experiences of people who have been most deeply impacted by traumas, by gender-based violence, by systems, and to see that resiliency, right, that resistance they've had is why they still are able to be themselves and to grow in those strengths. So it is an interesting way to take into strategic planning. That for me becomes really a powerful tool to see the answers come from the people who experience it. They know what they need.
Yeah, and if you need help and you go to an organization that's supposed to be helpful, but they don't see you and don't understand you, how will you be able to get help from them? Right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And we see things in so many different systems or communities because there is, from that, that intersection of indigeneity and sexuality and gender. And there is still a lot of places that talk about inclusivity, but that's not actually the walk that's happening. So it is, how do we see things, right, cross-culturally, or how do we see these intersections, because they are impacted differently. People get impacted differently every time there's another intersection point of their experience. And if systems or programs and services aren't responding to that in ways that really show that they are, not just empathizing, but listening to the community, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I just imagine how many folks over the years have said, well, that's not what it's like for me, actually, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of other work that I get to do within sort of justice-based systems, and I know one of the strategic directions is around this idea of justice. So we have things like, Commissioner's Directive 100 that says there's gender diversity inclusion within our correctional settings, but they still have to choose a binary. So it is, what does inclusivity truly look like? The overrepresentation of different populations like Indigenous people within these systems, and then having system answers. So here in our own city of St. John's, the work that First Voice does becomes incredibly instrumental because they can bring that intersectional piece. And this is what I appreciate. But what the YWCA St. John's is doing is that they're listening and engaging and responding. And that's what we need to see, more organizations doing, but also more system structures truly doing. Because if you're going to speak the language of inclusivity, which does help address violence, because we experience silent violence all the time because we go into spaces where we can't get access. And if you can't get access, that is our systemic level violence, like the cultural violence that exists, the gender violence that exists. It's because if you say, yes, we're going to have a policy, but the policy doesn't have framework or mechanisms or ways to actually apply that, well, we're still just talking, which goes back to the very first question, which is, why are we still here?
Yeah.
Well, that's a part of it, right?
Yeah, no, of course. I've got a piece of tape I'm going to play from First Voice because they left a message. And then we'll go over to Drishti after that because I want to talk to you about schools because we have someone on the line who's waiting patiently, and we'll get to them shortly. But Pike, if you want to just roll that tape.
So hello, and thank you for taking my call. Again, this is Chad Bedard from First Light. I'm calling on behalf of the First Voice Urban Indigenous Coalition. First Voice was launched in 2019 as a collaborative initiative bringing together Indigenous people, service providers, and all levels of government to advance truth and reconciliation in St. John's and across Newfoundland and Labrador. Our coalition works to promote and support the implementation of the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the calls for justice of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People. One of the core strengths as our coalition is the dedication and contribution of partners just like the YWCA. As an active member of our partnership table, the YWCA has been instrumental in advancing our shared goals. Through collaboration, the partnership table has accomplished significant milestones, including the development of the 42 Calls for Change, a critical framework for driving meaningful action on truth and reconciliation in St. John's and throughout the province. Beyond their involvement with First Voice, the YWCA has further demonstrated their commitment to reconciliation through initiatives such as hiring an Indigenous accountability partner and integrating reconciliation-focused priorities into their strategic plan. These actions serve as an inspiring example of how organizations can take tangible steps towards supporting Indigenous people and fostering systemic change. We encourage other organizations, institutions, and community groups to follow this example by embedding reconciliation into their policies, strategic plans, and everyday practices. Truth and reconciliation cannot be achieved in isolation. It requires a collective effort from all sectors and individuals to ensure that Indigenous people's rights, voices, and lived experiences are respected and supported. At First Voice and First Light, we believe that the values, perspectives, and leaderships of Indigenous peoples must guide this work. We invite anyone interested in learning more or getting involved to reach out to us on the shared journey towards reconciliation. Together, we can build a future where Indigenous rights and cultures are visible, valued, and upheld. I'd like to thank the Signal for the opportunity to share this message and to the YWCA for their ongoing partnership and leadership in this critical work. And we look forward to continuing to build momentum and driving meaningful change in our communities. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for that message. And folks, anytime you want to get in touch with the show, you can leave us a message on the Signal line, 709-576-5260. And we tend to play these messages, unless it's sometimes just a note for me on something. But if it's something for on air, we play them. And also the Signal at cbc.ca for emails. Drishti, can you talk to me about the Creating Space program?
Yes. So we've been talking about stats and intersectionality and the need for community programming that addresses gender-based violence. So Creating Space is one of those programs that the YWCA has developed as a direct response to the need in community. We go to high schools and it's delivered over 4 weeks, one session per week. The curriculum is developed very intentionally by our team, and we talk about consent, healthy relationships, supporting peers who may disclose violence to you at that young age, mental health and well-being, advocacy, allyship, all of those important topics that young people are looking to learn about, but those conversations aren't really happening, or there's no capacity for those conversations in schools. So that's how Creating Space was developed, and I'm currently delivering it at Gonzaga High School. Further collaboration happening for the winter of next year, and we really get together. We eat, we laugh, but we also have these very in-depth and open conversations around what are issues relating to GBV that are impacting youth of today, and what can the YWCA do to address that and support them.
Prevention, right? We're talking
prevention.
We're talking prevention. And we've got Tracy Gardner on the line from Gonzaga High School. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thanks for taking time to come on the show today. So for yourself and your position at Gonzaga, talk to me about the impact and importance of Creating Space.
Well, it never ceases to amaze me how students rise to the occasion, especially when they're given the space, pun intended, and the grace to speak their truths about such important topics. Gender-based violence is an incredibly tough topic, of course, but very necessary to talk about. So it comes as no surprise, then, that creating the space for the necessary conversations is absolutely warranted. I'm so glad that the YWCA reached out to us here at Gonzaga.
So when you, for the space that gets created, when you're Tracy Gardner watching this and the conversations, what's that like in your position to see how young folks are reacting and how they're learning from this?
It's actually probably mostly an emotional response. I guess I hear conversations, and I'm immediately drawn into other conversations I've had with parents, about how this type of program and how it has and how it is currently I guess, pulling students out of their shells and, again, allowing them that actual physical space where they feel safe to be able to have these conversations. It makes me, as a member of this school community, see that, you know, a lot of students who are generally normally maybe very quiet and introverted, they have a voice and they have an opinion, and they also have very sharp advocacy skills. So when given the opportunity, like creating space, this particular program, they're able to say what they feel, but they're also able to act sometimes. And it opens doors to potentially further careers in the area.
So what do you mean by allows them to act sometimes?
Well, act in that they're able to finally have a voice and say out loud in a group of like-minded people, and starting first, I guess, with them recognizing that, oh my goodness, other peers my age feel the same way, and you know, I do have a voice and I am able to speak my voice, and you know, there's strength in numbers, and you know, communicating and collaborating with my peers is a good way to get the message out there, if you will.
So then when you were in school, or I'll think about when I was in school, so I was through the 90s, right, 80s into the 90s. What difference would it have made back when you were in school to have something like this compared to, and like what kind of an impact do you think it could have had leading up to where we are now?
Huge, actually. You know, I think about, sometimes I sort of liken it to stigma sometimes that's attached to things. And, you know, although peers our age, they're quite bright than, say, you know, and different than we would be 15, 20 years ago while in school, you know, and they're starting to recognize that, you know, they have a voice, they can say things out loud, whereas years ago we probably wouldn't have been having these type of conversations, but also that they're able to act on them afterwards.
When we were getting ready for the show, you mentioned there's a little story to end on. Can you tell me about it?
So it was interesting, you know, we've had lots of feedback from the students about, you know, what their experience was with creating space, and just things I've heard, like generally like talking to the kids maybe after a session, or talking with Dristy with the kids. I say kids, young adults, you know, and talk about their experience with it. So, I mean, it's all positive, of course, but one of the stories I'd like to sort of share was that this year when we started creating space, you know, creating the schedule was a little bit of a challenge, but once we got that up and running, we had students who graduated from the program last year. They showed up for this program and were asking stories and asking questions like, Miss, how come I wasn't invited back for this year? And, you know, I really want to be a part of it. And I explained, well, you know, we're repeating the program this year, so there's nothing new. So they were asking, okay, well, Miss, when the next chapter begins, you know, let me know. I really want to be a part of it. So just thought that was kind of interesting that, you know, once that space was created for them to have those conversations, like many of the alumni, if you will, are asking to come back and looking forward to more. So it just goes to show the power, I guess, in starting those groups, and then students who want to stay involved for years to come, if you will.
Any lessons here for other schools or across Newfoundland and Labrador?
I'm sorry?
Any lessons here for other schools, or is this something, you know, what do you think for other, either whether it's across Newfoundland and Labrador or other parts of the country, when you look at your experience with this program, what do you think it could mean for other places?
Well, I mean, it aligns perfectly with the vision and the value for the Newfoundland and Labrador school development model. So, you know, we want to create environments where our students are engaged in learning. Creating space does that for them. You know, so I think for me, the message I want to send out is that I would absolutely 150% invite other guidance counselors or school personnel from other schools to welcome the YWCA, into their schools and create space for this particular program and maybe many others.
Tracy Gardner, thanks for taking time from your day at Gonzaga High to talk to us today. What's next for you? Is it lunchtime now, or what's next in your day?
We actually just started afternoon classes, so It's back to the grind.
All right, I'll let you get back to it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Tracy.
All right, thoughts on what Tracy was saying there?
I think it's just, it's important work, but it's also very special to come together to do it. Yeah. And it's just so much can happen at that intersection of collaboration and bringing people together and just going to the youth and talking about these things. I'd love to share one quote that
Yes, please.
I also have, which I keep coming back to when doing this work. It is anonymous, so I won't say who shared it. But one of the feedback pieces that we got last year is verbatim saying, people often say that you aren't alone when you speak about certain experiences, but they often forget to help you feel less alone. And the most important part of this program for them, for the student, was actually feeling less alone rather than just being told it. And that is our why. And that is why we keep doing this work.
Quite the quote. I was just going to ask you too, can you just give an example of like what's something that gets talked about in these sessions, just so people can have a really fulsome understanding of an example of what things are like?
That's a great question. Last week, when I was at Gonzaga having the Creating Space session, we started with an introduction to gender-based violence, starting to talk about what it looks like, what are the different forms it can show up as. Teen dating violence and digital violence is one of the most prevalent forms of violence for youth. So we talk about those things, but we also started talking about consent and the age of consent, and we had a very critical and lovely conversation around who developed the laws. Why is the age a certain age when it could be much higher when you compare it to like the drinking age and other voting age and stuff? And just very in-depth conversations around what consent can look like, the gray areas, the questions that they may come up with.
So when you have young folks or young adults or soon-to-be adults, almost adults, with these types of conversations, the fact that they're so curious, the fact that they're thinking critically like this, and when you see this, how does that make you either think or feel around just the potential there for these young people?
I think the potential is just insurmountable. We often think that kids or young people are still developing, yes, but they also have a lot of thoughts already, and they have a lot to contribute. And I think it's in these cases when I see that, and it's just so real. And like, they are their own people. The world is at their fingertips with digital technologies, and they know a lot, and they understand a lot, and they have a lot to share. So I think it's just, it's very eye-opening, and it's very fulfilling to see that.
I want to check back with Aline Nitsigama here, CEO of YWCA Canada, who's been waiting so patiently on the line. How you doing?
No worries.
Any thoughts on what you're hearing from just the guests and then the conversation for this last bit or the second half of the show?
Yes, absolutely. Two things, but I'm going to focus on the second one, perhaps, and maybe leave the second one for later. The youth piece and the safety and how YWCA St. John's is engaging in that is making me think about the fact that at a national we had an opportunity to delve deeper into that issue, and we talk about how violence shows up in our homes, in our schools, on campus, at work, but also on screen. And that's where a lot of young people are gathering now. We all virtually are on an app or another. We have multiple ways we show up in these spaces, and how that has been a place where violence has also shifted, and very much showing around along the gender lines, and really producing a lot of disengagement from the leadership of young people, whether that's young women or young queer and 2S LGBTQI people. And so we looked around digital safety and did a lot of work around equipping young people, actually using voices as well that are coming from the grassroots level to share around how to keep safe on these spaces, so we can also continue to have the right to exist as our full selves in these spaces as well. So that is very much something that resonates, that I was hearing from some of the programs that the Y is doing at St. John's.
Yeah, on the digital side of it, the amount of work required for keeping folks, especially young folks, safe as it keeps changing, as apps keep being added, as AI comes into the conversation. I'm just imagining how difficult it must be to keep up with it, let alone try to help young folks prepare for it when sometimes they know more about it than the folks trying to teach them. It's
enormous. It's enormous. As a young and as a parent, it's something I reflect on every day. And we extend that to the gaming world, and how do we, and what that also engages in terms of masculinity, and how do we help engage men and boys in some of these spaces. There's a lot of work. That's a whole other show. Perhaps we're going to do some other day.
Oh yeah, no, it's actually that's on the list of shows I'm trying to do sooner rather than later. The men and boys side of it is on the list, and we will be doing something around it. Maria, you're going to say?
Well, it just reminds me of one of the ways that the work that YWCA St. John's and the work of the YWCA Canada really intersects around this topic. And so we were fortunate to be part of YWCA Canada's Black Hate project that culminated in a symposium that Drishti led in person. And so one thing I'm just drawing from this is, yes, there's a lot happening online, but the power that Drishti is harnessing in these living experiences, in-person experiences, and empowering young people to have conversations out loud is so important. And one of the strategic directions that we have is really to raise the profile of YWCA St. John's. And so this show, of course, really does that, but also hearing from the voices of teachers, and your quote, Drishti, is so powerful. And just to let folks know that Drishti's still looking for schools to take part in creating space. And, just to hear firsthand the impact that program is having, how it empowers young people to have voice is really, really special. I'm not sure if you want to say anything more about blockade as well, but I just think that's the link. This is the power of the YWCA movement, is linking some of those national conversations to on the ground here in St. John's and Newfoundland, Labrador.
How do folks get in touch, Drishti?
Get in touch with me over email, call, whatever works best. My email is Drishti, that's DRISHTI, at ywcastjohns.ca. And you can also get in touch with me over phone, so that's 709-771-3172.
We only have a couple minutes left. Maria, there's a lot, because you've got some social media stuff going on this month. Then there's a goal of working towards something. Can you just...
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. So yes, so part of raising the profile of YWCA St. John's is highlighting the work that we do, which we'll be doing across these 16 days of advocacy against gender-based violence. One day in particular we're going to be really reaching back out to community is December 6th, which you sort of highlighted as the National Day of Remembrance. On that day, we really want to focus on a way that people can truly make a difference. And that's with our NES Fund. It's the National Survivor Support Fund. And really, it's noting what we've all been saying about the stats around the life lost to gender-based violence. And financial resources are really one of the leading pathways to safety. And that's as described by survivors. So when folks donate to the NES Fund, it goes directly to people who need it the most. And we deliver survivors up to $1,000 in forms of financial assistance to support them leaving first and last month's rent, utilities, and as well as we have an amazing financial empowerment coordinator who leads this project and provides that warm connection to other community support. So we're going to be linking out on reaching out again on December 6th to ask folks to donate to the YWCA St. John's NES Fund and get that funds directly to folks who need it.
We have about 2 minutes left. Cole, any final thoughts from yourself today?
Just really grateful for the opportunity and to be able to collaborate. It's been a real gift being the owner of Crow Kinship Consulting to connect with a lot of nonprofits and academics and people in this province and across Turtle Island. So I just think that idea of always think intersectionally, also remembering the conversation, how do we include those who have created violence, including families of seeing the expansiveness of what chosen family looks like, being sure you're not invisibilizing certain populations. Always look around the circle that you're building and who isn't there, and then how does that get included. And to see this idea of how we address, respond, prevent gender-based violence, I think sometimes the language of end puts us in a place of almost impossibleness. And we need to, be grounded in the reality that there's a lot we can do to address and respond. And let's work collaboratively to continue doing that. So, and thank you to Maria and the team for letting me be a part of it. Thanks to Faye and Wisdom to Action. There's are people I really look up to, and just glad to be around the circle. So thank you.
Drishti, any final thoughts from you?
Just that, yes, GBV affects all of us really, and we all have a role, small or big, to play in ending it or addressing it. And I will end it with a call to schools. If you would like to bring creating space to your school and have these conversations around GBV, I'm very, very happy and eager to get in touch.
Aline, final thought.
Yeah, final thoughts.
You got about 20 seconds.
20 seconds. Thank you so much for having us. And I just wanted to amplify the call for action around the National Emergency Survivor Support Fund, the NEST Fund, because it allows people to leave violent situations. And also, we are also going to be running another campaign related to that. That's called the Rose Campaign. More information can be found on our website. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all for this conversation today. Maria Gentle, Drishti Patel, Cole Kippenhook, and Aline Nitsigama. Thank you. That is it for today's show, folks. Thanks for listening. Tomorrow, it's a conversation about food and fitness. It doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing approach, folks. Even with the holidays coming, we're going to find a sweet spot in between that we're going to aim for, health, the healthy side of things. That's tomorrow. Cheers.